Good morning. I'd like to call this voting meeting of the House Energy Committee to order at 10:02. Nick, would you please call the roll?
Chair Fiedler.
Here.
Representative Boyd.
Online.
Representative Brown.
On leave. By designation.
Representative Serrato.
Online.
Representative Davidson.
Here.
Representative Donahue.
Here.
Representative Friel.
Here.
Representative Dural.
Here.
Representative Ingalls.
Designation.
Representative McAndrew.
Designation.
Representative Pielli.
Online.
Here online.
Representative Rusnock.
Online.
Representative Steele.
Designation.
Representative Venkat.
Online.
Online.
Chair Causer.
Here.
Representative Armanini.
Here.
Representative Barton.
Designation.
Representative Cook.
Designation.
Representative Ham.
Designation.
Representative Kale.
Designation.
Representative Kephart.
Online.
Online.
Representative Mihalik.
Designation.
Representative Rapp.
She's online.
Representative Stambaugh.
Here.
Representative Warner.
Designation.
Representative Williams.
And he is with us online.
The attendance is recorded and a quorum has been established. You may proceed, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Nick. We will now proceed to the first order of business for today on our agenda, House Bill 2150, printers number 2777, sponsored by Representative Kyle Mullins, which the chair now calls up. Steve, please read a summary of the bill.
This bill establishes annual energy and water reporting requirements for data center facilities.
The chair is in receipt of one amendment to the bill. I would like to recognize Representative Donahue, who will offer A02529. Steve, please read a summary of the amendment.
This amendment clarifies that certain reporting requirements are to be estimated, removes the waste heat reporting requirement, and modifies the definition of data center to exclude small and multi-purpose facilities with partial data center operations.
Representative Donahue, would you like to speak on the amendment?
Thank you, Madam Chair. This amendment will make the reporting more straightforward and it will ensure that businesses with small data center operations, like those involved in telecommunication services, are not burdened to report. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Is there any discussion on the amendment? Chairman Causer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I'm opposed to the bill, but the amendment makes some technical changes that I have no objections to the amendment.
Thank you, Chairman. Anyone else? All right, before we proceed to a vote, I will just say that this amendment is agreed to, and I would urge a yes vote on the amendment. Nick, would you please call the roll?
Chair Fiedler.
Yes.
Representative Boyd.
Designation, yes.
Representative Brown.
Designation, yes.
Representative Serrato.
Designation, yes.
Representative Davidson.
Yes.
Representative Donahue.
Yes.
Representative Friel.
Yes.
Representative Dural.
Yes.
Representative Ingalls.
Designation, yes.
Representative McAndrew.
Designation, yes.
Representative Pielli.
Designation, yes.
Representative Rusnock.
Designation, yes.
Representative Steele.
Designation, yes.
Representative Venkat.
And designation, yes.
Chair Causer.
Yes.
Representative Armanini.
Yes.
Representative Barton.
Designation, yes.
Representative Cook.
Yes.
Representative Ham.
Yes.
Representative Kale.
Yes.
Representative Kephart.
Yes.
Representative Mihalik.
Yes.
Representative Rapp.
Yes.
Representative Stambaugh.
Yes.
Representative Warner.
Yes.
Representative Williams.
I believe that was
That
a
was
yes.
Okay. On the question, the ayes are 26 and the nays are 0. The amendment is adopted.
The amendment is adopted and the bill is amended. The question is, will the committee report House Bill 2150, sponsored by Representative Mullins, as amended? Is there any discussion on the bill? Chairman Causer?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, there are a number of concerns with this particular bill, and I'm going to point out a few of them. I'm concerned that the legislation specifically singles out one industry in Pennsylvania, so that's a number one concern. It also places requirements with a regulatory agency to collect this information, so I'm questioning why this regulatory agency needs this data. And then there's a security risk for the agency that is collecting this data and compiling it. So that's also a concern of mine. There's also a significant penalty on the reporting side of this. So overall, I think that this makes our state less competitive when looking at the legislation that's been proposed. And I would ask the members for a negative vote on this particular bill.
Thank you, Chairman. I thank Representative Mullins for bringing this legislation to the Energy Committee. I know data centers are something many people are talking about across our Commonwealth, and I believe that they have potentially wide-ranging impacts for families as relates to their bills, related to our communities and our environment. And I think it is both common sense and our responsibility as a legislature to better understand the possible impact of this rapidly growing industry that could have significant cumulative impacts for the Commonwealth. I also believe that a vast majority of the 13 million Pennsylvanians who would support efforts to gather this sort of information so we can have a better picture of what the industry, what impact the industry is having or could have. Seeing no further questions or comments on the bill, we will now proceed to a vote. Representative Armanini, you may go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Fiedler. In reviewing House Bill 2150, I agree with my Chairman Causer. This legislation where we're putting mandates on these people who are coming in, if I could ask the maker of the bill, when you were comprising this bill, did you look at other states' legislation on this to whereas is it better, equal, or is this just something that is generated from Pennsylvania?
Thank you so much, Representative. I believe the maker of the bill is actually the other Kyle of Scranton.
Okay, sorry.
Representative Mullins, no problem, no problem.
I get miskyled all the time. So
I know that a great deal of attention has gone into this piece of legislation along with stakeholders and looking at many, many other states, and I'm quite certain that the maker of the bill would be glad to talk with you about that when appropriate.
All right. Okay, thank you. The reason I'm saying that is this, in my opinion, is the new industrial revolution. This is the technical revolution of our country. We led in the first one. Is Pennsylvania going to lead in the next one? So we should be bringing forth legislation that our House and Senate side is in agreement to so we can move Pennsylvania. This is so important that if we do not get this right, we are going to fail, and economically, Pennsylvania is not going to grow. We've heard from our union tradespeople, we need to start natural gas production to generate energy. We need to go at warp speed. All legislation should be in agreement that it's going to go through the House and the Senate so we can get this to the governor's office and get it signed to start moving Pennsylvania. We can't miss out on this opportunity, and I fear with the way this legislation is written now, it is going to be faulty, and we are not going to win this. We must win this. That's all, my comments.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Representative Armanini. I, too, am hopeful that we can get this to the upper chamber for consideration. And I also believe that it is important that we are transparent and that we ask those companies that are coming to do business in our Commonwealth to be transparent about the potential impacts that they could have on the people who are already living there. And those folks are our constituents. And so to me, that piece is incredibly important. And it is my understanding that is exactly what this legislation aims to do, to make sure there's transparency and fairness and make sure the people who live in this Commonwealth are protected from any adverse impacts. Seeing no further comments or questions, will the committee report House Bill 2150, printers number 2777, sponsored by Representative Kyle Mullins, as committed. Those in favor of reporting the bill as amended will vote aye. Those opposed, no. Nick, please call the roll.
Chair Fiedler,
Yes.
Representative Boyd,
Yes by designation.
Representative Brown,
Yes by designation.
Representative Serrato,
Yes by designation.
Representative Davidson,
Yes.
Representative Donahue,
Yes.
Representative Friel,
Yes.
Representative Giral,
Yes.
Representative Ingalls,
Yes by designation.
Representative McAndrew,
Yes by designation.
Representative Pielli,
Yes by designation.
Representative Rusnak,
Yes by designation.
Representative Steele,
Yes designation.
Representative Venkat,
Yes designation.
Chair Causer,
No.
Representative Armanini,
No.
Representative Barton,
No.
Representative Cook,
No.
Representative Ham,
No.
Representative Kale,
No.
Representative Kephart,
No.
Representative Mihalik,
No.
Representative Rapp, Representative Stambaugh,
No.
Representative Warner,
No.
Representative Williams,
That was a no.
On the question, the ayes are 14, the nays are 12. The motion passes.
House Bill 2150, sponsored by Representative Kyle Mullins, will be reported from the Energy Committee as amended. Thank you, Representative, for being here. We will now move on to the second order of business for the day, House Bill 2151, printers number 2778, sponsored by Representative Kyle Donahue, which the chair now calls up. Steve, please read a summary of the bill.
This bill directs the Department of Community and Economic Development to develop a model ordinance to assist municipalities with the zoning of data centers.
The chair is in receipt of two amendments to the bill. I would like to recognize the prime sponsor, Representative Donahue, who will offer A02534. Steve, please read a summary of the amendment.
This amendment places the bill's provisions within Title 53, municipalities generally, requires the Center for Local Government Services to gather feedback from municipal organizations, from the Department of Environmental Protection, the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources, and environmental and conservation stakeholders. It also creates a 30-day public comment period and specifies that municipalities are not required to adopt any parts of the model ordinance.
Thank you. Representative Donahue, would you like to speak on your amendment?
Thank you, Chairwoman. This amendment just incorporates much of the feedback that we heard from local government organizations at our public hearing last month. It also ensures that public participation in public participation in creation of the ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any discussion on the amendment? Chairman Causer?
Madam Chair, I don't have much to say on the amendments. I'm opposed to both of them, and I have comments for the bill generally.
Thank you. Are there any other comments or questions on the amendment? And I will just say that I would urge a yes vote on the amendment. Thank you to the representative for offering it. Nick, would you please call the roll?
Chair Fiedler,
Yes.
Representative Boyd,
Yes by designation.
Representative Brown,
Yes by designation.
Representative Serrato,
Yes by designation.
Representative Davidson,
Yes.
Representative Donahue,
Yes.
Representative Friel,
Yes.
Representative Giral,
Yes.
Representative Ingalls,
Yes by designation.
Representative McAndrew,
Aye.
Representative Pielli,
Yes by designation.
Representative Rusnak,
Yes by designation.
Representative Steele,
Yes by designation.
Representative Venkat,
Yes by designation.
Chair Causer,
No.
Representative Armanini, Representative Barton,
No.
Representative Cook,
No.
Representative Ham,
No.
Representative Kale,
No.
Representative Kephart,
No.
Representative Mihalik,
No.
Representative Rapp,
No.
Representative Stambaugh,
No.
Representative Warner,
No.
Representative Williams.
No.
On the question, the ayes are 14 and the nays are 12. The amendment is adopted.
Thank you. The amendment is adopted and the bill is amended. I would like to now recognize Representative Friel, who will offer A02552. Steve, please read a summary of the amendment.
This amendment requires the model ordinance to include provisions for conducting water feasibility studies, documentation of a data center's water permits, and proof of adequate electric service from the public utility.
Thank you. Representative Friel, would you like to speak on your amendment?
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. The introduced bill with the amendments just provided does a good job, I think, in many of the considerations that were brought up at our last meeting. However, I think it's important that explicitly we recognize that a municipality's authority is to ensure that the data center has adequate water supply and adequate energy needs to be able to do this. I think that is something that was lacking here, and this bill, this amendment would strengthen the bill further.
Thank you, Representative. Is there any discussion on the amendment? All right, and before we proceed to a vote, I'll just say that I would urge a yes vote on this amendment. Nick, would you please call the roll?
Chair Fiedler,
Yes?
Representative Boyd,
Yes by designation.
Representative Brown,
Yes by designation.
Representative Serrato,
Yes by designation.
Representative Davidson,
Yes.
Representative Donahue,
Yes.
Representative Friel,
Yes.
Representative Giral,
Yes.
Representative Ingalls,
Yes by designation.
Representative McAndrew,
Aye.
Representative Pielli,
Yes designation.
Representative Rusnock,
Yes designation.
Representative Steele,
Yes designation.
Representative Venkat,
Yes designation.
Chair Causer,
No.
Representative Armanini,
No.
Representative Barton,
No.
Representative Cook,
No.
Representative Ham,
No.
Representative Kale,
No.
Representative Kephart,
No.
Representative Mihalik,
No.
Representative Rapp,
No.
Representative Stambaugh,
No.
Representative Warner,
No.
Representative Williams.
No.
On the question, the ayes are 14, the nays are 12. The amendment is adopted.
Thank you. The amendment is adopted and the bill is amended. The question is, will the committee report House Bill 2151, sponsored by Representative Donahue, as amended? Is there any discussion on the bill? Chairman Causer?
Yes, please.
Would you like him to go first, Representative Williams?
I'll go, and then he can go.
Okay. We'll have Chairman Causer and then Representative Williams, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I think we heard loud and clear at our hearing that we had on this bill that there are some challenges here with the legislation. And I think we heard that directly from organizations like the Pennsylvania Association of Township Supervisors. This legislation, which would create a model ordinance, would create the appearance of a one-size-fits-all state-approved model ordinance, when in fact the Commonwealth is very diverse, and this particular model ordinance may be problematic in some areas where not in others. And there are a number of questions still regarding the legislation, specifically who's at the table, who's drafting this model ordinance. You know, in my mind, municipalities are already dealing with the challenges that they face and do not need a model ordinance. And so I'm opposed to the legislation and would ask the members for a negative vote.
Thank you, Chairman. Representative Williams?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've already started to receive feedback from municipalities in my district in opposition to this bill. In particular, Chadsport Township, which is a historic township centered around the Battle of the Brandywine, which has a very different feel than some of my other municipalities, has already developed its own ordinance relative to data centers and is right now trying to get that approved at the county level. I've got other municipalities who are already in discussions about that. Their worry and the worry of their solicitors is that, number one, if we engage in a Commonwealth-wide form of rulemaking to come up with a model ordinance, you'll delay their opportunity to pass their own ordinances now as the counties start to shut down awaiting that product. And then the second is once there is a DCED statute in place or regulation in place that sets up a model ordinance, then you have a windmill against which other people can litigate against the municipalities for unfavorable treatment locally. In other words, by putting a standard out there that is ostensibly embraced by the Commonwealth, you set up litigation for the municipalities about their own ordinances, which of course, I don't think the maker of the bill intended whatsoever, but it is absolutely in the same way that we see constant litigation over zoning regulations and ordinances, you'll see years of litigation, I assume by industry, but it could be by environmentalists on the other side as well, about the ordinance passed by the municipality as compared to the standard of the model bill. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Representative. I want to thank Representative Donahue for bringing this bill to the committee, and I want to make very, very clear that the good news is that this bill is not a requirement, it is not a mandate, and it does not, in fact, restrict local officials' decision-making in any way. It is optional. It is a model ordinance. And the bill as amended has the support of the Boroughs Association, and the township supervisors with the bill as amended are neutral. So just want to make sure we have those out there, those facts. I think we all know that data centers are, it's an industry that is rapidly developing, and local elected officials are doing the best that they can as this situation continues to evolve. I think this bill is responsible, it is thoughtful, and it gives local elected officials another tool as they seek to do their work in their neighborhoods. Again, I believe this optional model ordinance is something that could help local elected officials as they do their work and seek to make the best decisions for their communities. And I want to thank the representative for bringing this bill to our attention. Seeing no further questions or comments on the bill, we will now proceed to a vote. Will the committee report House Bill 2151, sponsored by Representative Kyle Donahue, as amended? Those in favor of reporting the bill as amended will vote aye. Those opposed, no. Nick, please call the roll.
Chair Fiedler.
Yes.
Representative Boyd.
Yes, by designation.
Representative Brown.
Yes, by designation.
Representative Serrato.
Yes, designation.
Representative Davidson.
Yes.
Representative Donahue.
Yes.
Representative Friel.
Yes.
Representative Giral.
Yes.
Representative Ingalls.
Yes, designation.
Representative McAndrew.
Aye.
Representative Pielli.
Yes, designation.
Representative Rusnock.
Yes, designation.
Representative Steele.
Yes, designation.
Representative Venkat.
Yes, designation.
Chair Causer.
No.
Representative Armanini.
No.
Representative Barton.
No.
Representative Cook.
No.
Representative Ham.
No.
Representative Kale.
No.
Representative Kephart.
No.
Representative Mihalik.
No.
Representative Rapp.
No.
Representative Stambaugh.
No.
Representative Warner.
No.
Representative Williams.
We didn't hear you, Craig.
I'm a no.
On the question, the ayes are 14 and the nays are 12. The motion passes.
Thank you. The House Energy Committee will now report House Bill 2151, printers number 2778, sponsored by Representative Kyle Donahue, as amended. With no further business before the committee, the meeting is now adjourned at 10:27, and we'll take a very brief break and move into the next portion of our day. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for being here and sticking around for the second portion of the day. I'd like to call this informational meeting of the House Energy Committee to order at 10:34. Nick, would you please call the roll?
I'm sorry, I'll be on momentarily.
No
One second.
problem.
Chair Fiedler,
Here.
Representative Boyd,
On leave.
Representative Brown,
On leave.
Representative Serrato,
On leave.
Representative Davidson,
On leave.
Representative Donahue,
On leave.
Representative Friel,
On leave.
Representative Giral, Representative Ingalls,
On leave.
Representative McAndrew,
Present.
Representative Pielli,
On leave.
Present online.
Representative Rusnock,
On leave.
Representative Steele,
On leave.
Representative Venkat,
On leave.
Chair Causer,
Here.
Representative Armanini, Representative Barton,
On leave.
Representative Cook,
On leave.
Representative Ham,
On leave.
Representative Kale,
On leave.
Representative Kephart,
He is online.
Representative Mihalik,
On leave.
Representative Rapp,
She's
Here.
also joining us online.
Representative Stambaugh,
Here.
Representative Warner,
On leave.
Representative Williams,
And Representative Williams just texted me, and he's trying to get in. He's waiting to be let in.
Yeah, we'll get him in.
So he will be joining us online.
Attendance is recorded. Proceed, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much. And I know Tabitha is working to get the representative back into the meeting. Thank you, Nick, and thank you to our members, testifiers, and guests for attending today's informational hearing on Pennsylvania's net metering policies. For those of you not familiar, probably not folks in this room, but other folks, net metering is the policy that allows customers who generate their own electricity to receive credit on their utility bills for excess power they send back to the grid. Sounds like a simple concept, but it's very complicated, and there's a lot of nuance. We wanted to have this hearing to talk about the policy and to talk about how this framework has helped expand clean energy adoption, increase Pennsylvania's energy independence, and diversify our state's power mix. I have heard from energy, consumer, business, and environmental groups, as well as utilities, the PUC, and consumer advocate, that our current policy may need updating. I've also heard that there are ongoing efforts to rewrite net metering policy through utility rate cases. I believe that this is something that falls within the purview of the legislature, and I'm hoping we will gain ideas and better information and understanding from this hearing so that we can move forward. As costs climb, my mind is always on the people back home who are struggling with high bills and worried about even higher bills. I believe we also must encourage the development of local, clean, reliable, and affordable energy in Pennsylvania. I look forward to the testimony today, and again, thank the panelists for being here. Chairman Causer, do you have any opening remarks?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I want to welcome our testifiers today and thank them for joining us. I'm looking forward to the information that's going to be presented. I'm reminded of a tour that we did last summer where we went to a farm up in Juniata County, a farm that puts electricity back on the grid, and certainly that was important for that farm, but important for all of us in general. So there again, looking forward to the information and thank our testifiers.
Thank you, Chairman. I enjoyed that trip. I'd like to take another field trip. I found it very informational and informative. Today we have 7 testifiers joining us, split between 2 panels. Stephen DeFrank, Chairman of the Pennsylvania Public Utilities Commission, Darrell Lawrence, PA Consumer Advocate, Nazari Sabri, PA Small Business Advocate, and Andy Tubbs, President and CEO of the Energy Association, will be our first panel. With our second panel joined by Todd S. Stewart, partner, HMS Legal LPP, Elowen Corby, Mid-Atlantic Regional Director of Vote Solar, and Katie Reaver, Director of Legislative and Regulatory Affairs at IGS Energy. Testifiers, thank you for being here, and thank you to the first panel for joining us. Please know that members have your written testimony in their packets, and we will wait until all four of you have spoken to ask our questions. I will start with you, Chairman DeFrank. You may begin.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair Fiedler, Chairman Causer, and members of the House Energy Committee. My name is Steve D. Frank, and I'm Chairman of the Pennsylvania Public Utility Commission. I appreciate the opportunity to testify today on this important issue. As I said, Chair, I've been waiting to have this conversation a long time, and the reason is because some of the numbers I'm going to talk about later in my testimony. The Alternative Energy Portfolio Standards Act, or AEPS Act, requires electric distribution companies, or EDCs, and electric generation suppliers, or EGSs, to supply 18% of the electricity using qualifying alternative energy resources. The AEPS Act is jointly administered by the Commission and the Department of Environmental Protection and defines net metering as, quote, the means of measuring the difference between the electricity supplied by an electricity utility and the electricity generated by a customer generator when any portion of the electricity generated by the alternative energy generating system is used to offset part or all of the customer's generator's requirements for electricity, end quote. EDCs must offer net metering to customers consistent with the rules established via the AEPS Act, Commission orders, and regulations, while EGSs may offer net metering consistent with the terms established in their private contracts. The net metering rules, including the AEPS Act, were intended to incentivize homeowners and businesses to invest in behind-the-meter generation systems that would offset their own energy use. It did so by allowing them to sell energy back to the grid at the full retail value, which the Commission has interpreted as the EDC's price to compare. Net metering resources, which may also be referred to as distributed energy resources, or DERs, offer a much faster and easier means to interconnect smaller decentralized generation. DERs assist in the avoidance of costly upgrades to the transmission system and therefore represent a critical component to a reliable and affordable grid. Unfortunately, over time, these net metering rules have been used in ways that were never intended when the law was enacted. Increasingly, merchant generation facilities with little or no on-site electric load are qualifying for retail rate net metering compensation. These projects are structurally different from the customer generators, homeowners, and businesses that the statute was designed to support. Net metering was intended to offset a customer's own electric use, not serve as a revenue mechanism for facilities whose output is sold entirely back to the grid at the EDC's price to compare, which is significantly higher than wholesale market rates. That difference, currently an average upcharge of approximately 47%, is what creates the looming cost cliff for small businesses and other utility customers across Pennsylvania. It is important to understand that compensation paid to net metering facilities is recovered from other ratepayers. Today, the annualized cost of excess retail rate totals approximately $6.4 million per year from 36 facilities. Based on projects already moving through the interconnection process, that figure is expected to exceed $90 million per year by 2027, a more than 14-fold increase in just 2 years. Moreover, with more than 2,100 interconnection requests currently pending statewide, those costs could grow to more than $700 million annually if all those facilities proceed under existing rules. These escalating costs are first borne by commercial and industrial customers, including small businesses operating at narrow margins. As those costs compound, they inevitably ripple outward, affecting hiring decisions, consumer prices, and ultimately residential customers as EDCs recover these expenses through rates. Left unchecked, this trajectory represents a significant affordability concern for Pennsylvania households and employers alike. This cost cliff is the result of a February 17, 2021 order by the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, which affirmed the Commonwealth Court's May 12, 2020 opinion invalidating portions of the Commission's net metering regulations. Consequently, solar facilities up to 3 megawatts with little or no on-site electric load, often limited to parasitic consumption for the project, are allowed to qualify for full retail rate net metering compensation. As an example, the Commission recently reviewed the interconnection of a 3-megawatt solar project with an expected annual electricity demand of 2,000 kilowatts. To put that in another perspective, that means a customer generating enough power to support over 500 homes is only using the amount of power expected for one small residential customer. I would contend that that is not the original intent of the Act. While distributed generation and solar resources play an important role in grid modernization and reliability, their development should not occur in a manner that shifts disproportionate costs onto residential and business customers. To that end, the Commission supports legislative updates to our net metering rules under the APS Act that would continue to foster true end-user net metering customers, those that were always the intended beneficiaries, while preventing merchant generators from receiving excessive compensation at the expense of other ratepayers in the system. Particularly now, with energy affordability becoming increasingly urgent concern for households and employers alike, aligning these rules with their original statutory intent is a major priority for the Public Utility Commission. I thank you for holding this hearing today. Look forward to working with the General Assembly to address this issue and happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Chairman. Darrell Lawrence, if you would go next, Pennsylvania Consumer Advocate.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair Fiedler, Chair Causer, members of the House Energy Committee. My name is Darrell Lawrence. I have the honor of serving as Pennsylvania's Consumer Advocate. Thank you for the opportunity to testify about net metering and its impact on Pennsylvania's ratepayers. We'll skip over parts of the beginning of my testimony as the Chairman has adequately covered what the APS Act requires. Under the Commission's regulations, I would say that the electric utilities serve as the customer's default service supplier, are required to provide a credit to the customer generator's bill at the full retail kilowatt hour rate for the produced generation that offsets the customer's usage during the applicable billing period. Any excess generation, as we know, is carried forward on a kilowatt hour basis, and it's credited against that customer's subsequent billing period at the full retail rate. At the end of the year, if any remaining excess kilowatt hours of generation remains, an annual cash out occurs, where the default service provider, again, must monetarily compensate the customer generator at the DSP's prevailing price to compare. Now, the price to compare in the Commission's regulations includes the sum of all electric unbundled generation and transmission-related charges, but excludes distribution charges. That means that at the end of the annual period, if the customer generator's qualifying resource produces more kilowatt hours than the customer consumes, the customer generator is cashed out or compensated at the price to compare, which is the rate that the customer would have paid for the supply portion of their electric bill. As specific questions from the committee, what should be the aims of Pennsylvania's net metering policy? In my view, the aim should be the promotion of alternative energy generation, and 2, avoiding unreasonable subsidization by non-net metering customers, especially low-income customers. Customers who do not have solar panels or other distributed energy resources, especially low-income customers, should not be unfairly burdened by the costs of net metering. When customer generators are compensated for excess generation at the end of the year based on the price to compare, it is under the theory that the DSP can avoid incurring the generation and transmission costs to serve those customers. So the question is Pennsylvania's net metering policy currently meeting those aims? If not, how should the policy be changed? I have a few thoughts. There are options that can potentially improve Pennsylvania's net metering policy to reduce any cost shifting between net metering customers and non-net metering customers. The first option is changing the annual cash out to be based on the avoided cost model rather than the price to compare. The current price to compare used to calculate customer generator supply credits includes more costs than just generation and transmission. It also includes alternative energy credits, administrative costs, and a reconciliation for over and under collections. Under the avoided cost compensation model, which is used in several other states, the utility compensates the net metering customer for any excess generation that is not used by the customer generator at what it would have cost for the utility to purchase that power. The avoided cost is the expense that the utility avoids by not having to purchase power from a third party. Now, there is a map in my testimony that identifies the states that have adopted either retail rate, avoided cost rate, or some rate between the two that's current as of September 2025. Treating excess power as a wholesale commodity and compensating any power sent to the grid at the avoided cost makes sense as a potential option, since it is the price the utility would have paid to buy the power. The avoided cost approach protects other consumers from needing to pay for this surplus power at rates higher than necessary and reflects the actual dynamics of the market, while continuing to incentivize investments in alternative sources of energy by customer generators. Another option is to apply the billing credits that net metering customers receive in a billing period to the supply portion of the bill only. In other words, generation and transmission charges, but not distribution charges. When a net metering customer offsets their own usage and sends excess generation to the electric distribution system, they may not pay for the maintenance of the distribution system that they rely on during evenings, bad weather, or other events. This results in a cost shift, where other customers need to make up for this lack of payment towards distribution charges in order to maintain the electric distribution system. To the extent that the legislature wants to explore alternative approaches to net metering at avoided cost for excess generation rather than price to compare, the legislature could consider grandfathering in current customer generators that are already participating in net metering to protect those customers from a change they could not have foreseen when determining whether to participate in net metering. Additionally, a multi-year phase-in may also be appropriate to provide sufficient notice to customers about the potential change in law. In conclusion, the legislature has options to consider to protect ratepayers from unreasonably subsidizing those who choose to participate in net metering, and my office is interested in having a further discussion regarding this issue. Thank you for the opportunity to submit this testimony. I'm happy to respond to any questions you may have.
Thank you very much. Ms. Sabri, you may go ahead. Thank you.
Good morning. Good morning, Chair Fiedler, Chair Causer, and members of the committee. My name is Nazara Sabri, and I serve as Small Business Advocate representing the PA Office of Small Business Advocate. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today on behalf of the Commonwealth's net metering policies and their impact on small businesses. As most in this room probably know, net metering is a policy designed to encourage the adoption of renewable distributed generation by allowing customer generators to set the kilowatt-hour billing determinant for all energy charges on the bill. This includes generation, transmission, distribution, and universal service charges. This net basis reflects the difference between power delivered to the customer and power shipped back to the distribution system. As I understand, net metering was originally predicated on the idea that each customer generates enough to meet their own energy needs. This is why most states are now constrained in how many credits they can grant to customers for generation that exceeds their consumption. To address this constraint, the Pennsylvania legislature provides relief in two ways. A, net generators can cash out excess generation at the generation price to compare. And B, general service customers can install up to 3 megawatts of generating capacity regardless of their size of their actual loads. These customer generators are generally placed in a small business rate category. To be clear, the OSBA is not opposed to incentivizing the development of renewable distributed generation. Rather, The Commonwealth's net metering policy should balance clean energy goals, compensation for solar producers, and affordability and equity for small business customers. The incentive structure in the Commonwealth is so rich that it has attracted sophisticated market actors that put financial stress on the system. Some distribution territories are seeing a flood of project applications for so-called no-load net metering installations. These customer generators consume minimal energy from the grid, but generate and export large amounts of electricity. I'm not talking about the typical household or Main Street shop with a few solar panels on their roof. What concerns me most is that Pennsylvania's current classification system results in small business default service customers disproportionately subsidizing customer generators. Here's why. When customers generate excess energy, the purchased excess power is treated as default service supply, and the customer generators receive compensation. Under existing regulations, these purchases are applied to the same class as the customer generator from whom the power is purchased. Thus, if small business customers with minimal loads export large amounts of generation, the burden of the higher cost default service supplies currently falls on small business default service customers, including non-net metering customers. Now, you may ask, why don't small businesses just leave default service and shop for their energy supply? Well, they most certainly will, given the bill impacts caused by these customer generators. For example, in the ongoing PPL base rates case, the company is forecasting significant increases in supply prices for default service small businesses because of the potential customer general projects in its service territory. In addition, it's not clear the supply marketplace is sufficiently competitive to efficiently address this new shopping load. Finally, if more small business customers opt out of default service, the burden of compensation customer generators will fall on an ever-shrinking group of small business customers. Some utilities have proposed a Band-Aid approach to this problem, namely pushing some of these customer generators into large commercial or industrial classes, where the price to compare is lower. But this approach doesn't represent a comprehensive fix. It just spreads the pain around. Instead of a patchwork of rules that vary by utility, we need a legislative solution that reflects the complexity of this challenge, one that properly encourages the renewable energy investments the Commonwealth needs without disproportionately burdening small business customers. In addition to our own research, the OSBA looks forward to the opportunity to collaborate with the committee and other stakeholders to reform the Commonwealth's net metering policy. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you so much. And our final guest for panel one, Mr. Tubbs, you may go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Fiedler. Good morning, Chair Fiedler, Chairman Cowser, and members of the committee. I'm Andy Tubbs, and I'm the president of the Energy Association. You have my written testimony, and I'll just want to speak directly to a few of the matters that I think matter most this morning. You know, I testified in the end of last month before this in a joint hearing with the House Consumer Affairs Committee on customer affordability. And I think that really is the concern that we're talking about today. Every stakeholder in this room, utilities, consumer advocates, and this committee care about keeping energy bills manageable for Pennsylvania families and small businesses. That shared commitment is exactly what we're here for, because there's a growing and unnecessary cost shift embedded in Pennsylvania's net metering rules that is working directly against affordability, and it is fixable. Net metering was designed for homeowners and small businesses who install rooftop solar to offset their own energy use. That's a good policy. But Pennsylvania courts have interpreted the law to allow what are functionally small commercial plants, entities that generate electricity purely to sell it back to the grid, to be treated identically to a homeowner with rooftop solar. They are not homeowners. They are not small businesses. They are commercial generators using a customer billing structure to capture a subsidy that was designed for a very different purpose. Here's what that costs. Merchant generators are paid the full retail rate for their electricity, which was 7 cents per kilowatt hour more than the wholesale market price. On a facility that exports millions of kilowatt hours annually, that's $350,000 or more in above market payments per facility per year. Across just Pennsylvania utilities, we can document $33 million annually shifted from bills of families and businesses to commercial solar developers, and it's accelerating. Interconnection applications for merchant generators at one utility alone grew from 52 in 2022 to 972 in 2024. This is measurable, growing transfer of wealth from residential customers to commercial generators. I should note that even for genuine residential solar customers, crediting them the full retail rate, which includes distribution, infrastructure, transmission, and shared program costs, does shift some of these costs onto neighbors who do not have solar. The unanimous PUC approval of UGI's approach to merchant generator reclassification in its default service case is telling. Pennsylvania's utility regulator, appointed across administrations, agreed this problem was real and that current treatment distorts markets and and harms customers. The fact that even that unanimous decision now faces appellate challenge makes the case for a legislative solution stronger, not weaker. Customers should not have to wait for a utility-by-utility, case-by-case process when the underlying problem is statewide. I think it's worth noting when we talk about these commercial generators and its impact, we often focus on the largest utilities in Pennsylvania, but we have small electric utilities that are represented by the Energy Association as well. If you look at a company like Wellsboro Electric, who serves about 6,000 customers, sells about 80,000 megawatt hours a year, 2 projects alone in their service territory is 6 megawatts. That is a significant cost impact on those customers, to the tune of over a penny per kilowatt hour. That is substantial. And we're looking at a customer bill, and we're talking about affordability. This is an opportunity to look at real money to help real customers and help meet their monthly needs. So we look forward to working with this committee and other stakeholders as we process these issues. And again, these reforms that we've identified in our testimony will help protect the 9 million customers who fund these systems. And we do look forward to your questions.
Thank you so much. And looks like we've got teams back up as well. We're going to move into questions for this panel. Due to our limited time, I'll ask that members please direct their question to one of the panelists if possible. Chairman DeFrank, I'll start with you. My question is for you. In your testimony, you say, it is important to understand that compensation paid to net metering facilities is recovered from other ratepayers. In the simplest of terms, without acronyms, could you please just describe the impact you believe the current state of affairs is having on regular people? I care deeply about getting renewable energy online, and I also care deeply about people's bills, and we know they're already very high.
Sure.
So if you would, thank you.
I thank you for having this hearing today and having this discussion. And I think it's what the Small Business Advocate had talked about. So as she explained, the rate class, we have 3 rate classes: industrial, business, small commercial, and residential. The small business, small commercial is probably the smallest of those rate classes. The residential is the largest numbers, industrial is the largest load. So there's simply not, the rate class isn't big enough to absorb these costs. So what's going to happen, the EDC comes to us and says, hey, as the advocate pointed out, people are going to start shopping. So that's going to shrink the pool. So costs are going to increase, pool's going to decrease. There's going to be less people to spread the cost over. They're simply not going to be able to pay it. So the EDC is going to come to us and say, hey, what do you want us to do with these costs? We have to spread them over some pool. There simply isn't another pool for us to access other than the residential ratepayer.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Chairman Causer, do you have any questions? Representative Williams online, we're going to go to you first.
Madam Chair, are you hearing me okay?
Yes, I am. Thank you.
Okay, super. I've been having some technical difficulties on my end, and I appreciate your patience. First of all, thank you to you, Madam Chair, for having this hearing. As you know, this is something that I've been working on for about 15 years, 10 in the energy sector and 5 in the General Assembly. Chairman DeFrank, I think I'm going to limit my question to you with a bit of a wind-up because I know you will tolerate it. I find your services, Chair, to be truly remarkable. You are a man who is intellectually honest and intellectually curious. And in this space and this time, that's exactly what we need by way of leadership at the PUC. And I thank you for that. As you may recall, we passed a I can't remember what the proper noun was for it, Madam Chair, but I think it was Solar for All or something to that effect, where we put a net metering amendment on the bill that would have required the PUC to engage in rulemaking, which I had intended to be your way of combating back to the Pennsylvania Supreme Court's ruling that your prior rulemaking was unconstitutional. And we passed that in a widely bipartisan way on the House floor. And then that amendment was stripped out in the Appropriations Committee after a great deal of backlash from the solar community. I say that by way of laying a stage or setting a stage. I think it's important for members of the committee, members of the House, and our constituents to understand what this problem is without us 5 energy lawyers using terms like price to compare and EDC and, least costs over time if we're talking about procurements, and make it very, very simple. I use this analogy. Many of us remember the old school cell phone bill where you go into AT&T and Verizon and you would negotiate with the guy there in the store. Like, this is how many minutes I plan on using my cell phone. This is how much data, how many text message I plan on using. And you'd negotiate a usage package for a cost every month. The piece of your bill that you could never avoid were the federal, state taxes, and your other FCC costs, your fixed costs on that bill. You could never negotiate those away. In the solar world, what happens is now twofold. One is every time a retail or residential level solar customer puts rooftop solar on their home, they're not only able to avoid all of their usage, their energy usage, but also their utility portion of the bill, the fixed cost of your bill for poles and wires to come to your house and ostensibly to take your power back to the grid. That was not contemplated when AEPS was passed. In other words, it was never contemplated that a residential solar customer could take all of their distribution costs, their utility costs, and put them on everyone else. Then you compound that with merchant generators doing just as you said, Mr. Chairman, building facilities where they have no intent of using that power to offset their demand. They're selling it back under statutory compulsion, selling it back to the EDC at a retail price, which, as you noted, looks to be another enormous cost escalator to ratepayers in Pennsylvania. So we have capacity market that's out of control because of anticipated demand, and now we have solar merchant generators and the aggregated residential customer putting almost another $1 billion of utility tax back onto all of the non-solar customers. That's the landscape that we're in, said as simply as I can say it. Here's the question for you, Mr. Chairman, as simply as I can express it. What if we decide in AEPS that the utility still has a requirement for 18% for alternative energy resources, but they get out of the business of reconciling solar activity within the utility sector? In other words, you force all of the solar into the marketplace to sell power to the utilities. They still have a requirement to buy up to 18%, whether it's solar or whatever level of AEPS we're talking about. Can we get utilities out of the business of reconciling this net metering problem?
Thank you, Representative. Chairman, you may go ahead.
So, Representative, first off, thank you for those very kind words there. I appreciate it, and I always appreciate our dialogues about this. So you do raise a very good point, and in fact, we did PPL's last default service case. We did something, and that was a 3-2 vote. There was a lot of opposition to that, but what we enabled PPL to do is to look at all that asset, all that supply asset holistically, and be able to manage that holistically. That's not really a a virtual power plant, but it sort of is, because a VPP would be going directly into the grid, bidding into PJM marketplace. This is sort of doing that at the local distribution end. So I thought that was a very creative solution we did with PPL. I think that is the way we're going in terms of treating these assets, this generation assets, holistically, and not treating it house by house by house, but allowing the EDC to have that flexibility of being able to control all that supply, again, holistically. In the PPL case, I believe they were saving about 250 to 300 megawatts over the life of that, over the life of the term of the plan. So that's something where that's generation that does not have to be built, does not have to be, sent out to customers, simply by how we manage it, how we manage the asset we have. So I think that may be a little bit of what you're talking about. I certainly think that's where we're going with distributed generation and the ability of being able to leverage that comprehensively. I think we're going to see more and more of that.
Thank you, Chairman.
And my question is actually more specifically to whether or not we can pass by statute a requirement that whether it's small solar or larger solar, that they be sold through the competitive market. Perhaps the residential solar are aggregated so that we get both the PUC and the EDC out of the business of managing generation, even at the small residential level, so that we don't have to have utility solutions coming through a default service plan, but instead they go to the market through aggregators and other marketers to sell back to the EDC.
That's an interesting plan, and I'll have to get back to you. I got to think about that, because there was a lot to that. That's a novel concept. I haven't heard anything like that before. But the reason I talked about the PPL plan is that's sort of a smaller approach to what you're talking about. You're talking about doing the same thing that PPL is doing within their service territory statewide, right?
That's right.
Yep.
All right, Chairman. Thank you, Chairman Fiedler, also.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you both. We will now go to Representative McAndrew.
Don't have to. I'm not going to be as long with my question, but I do appreciate the insight from our representative online. You've highlighted the cost impacts of merchant generators, but how can the PUC distinguish between pure merchant projects and mid-scale solar on warehouses and brownfields near transmission infrastructure that actually reduce grid strain and benefit customers?
So we are able to differentiate a merchant generator in our solar program compared to someone who may have rooftop solar or a business that has rooftop solar. If your question's asking the specific location of that merchant generator, is that what you're asking?
No. Overall, I just want to make sure that there is ability to distinguish between the both.
So we are able to distinguish where that merchant generator goes, though. That's pretty much they're bringing us the application, and then we're evaluating it. Certainly, I understand what you're getting at, and there certainly would be cost savings by utilizing that existing infrastructure, and we would certainly encourage that.
Told you I'd be quick.
Thank you.
Thank you. Chairman Causer.
Well, thank you very much to all of our testifiers. Chairman DeFrank, I think you're practically a member of the committee these days. You've been here so many times, but welcome. And I'm probably the only member of the committee that was actually here when the AEPS was passed, I think in 2004. So I'm dating myself a little bit. I'm concerned about mandates, concerned about the cost to ratepayers, and concerned about production and needing more energy. I guess my question is somewhat straightforward. Can we put a number on how much money net metering has cost other ratepayers in the Commonwealth that do not participate in net metering?
So I have Joe Sherrick, who is our technical person on this. We are able to get that to you. I don't have it right now, but we'd be happy to send it to the committee. And I don't know if you want me to respond through the chair or.
That would be fine. I think that would be valuable for all of us to know exactly what that
we
has
will get
cost.
that
And
to
then,
you.
as one quick follow-up to that, what are other states doing in this realm? Because obviously, there are policies that are different in every state, but do you have any grasp for what other states are doing?
So I think we're sort of, and others may be able to answer this better, but with some of the court decisions we've had here sort of puts us as an outlier of some of these. And I don't know that other states are experiencing that because they haven't had some of the court decisions we've had here.
Okay. Any follow-up information would be
I don't
helpful.
know, Andy, if you want to add to that or anyone.
I will just add that, as the chairman said, we are definitely a unicorn in this space. We have been looking at other states like West Virginia, Ohio, California to see what they're doing and how we can implement what they've been doing and what's working and what's not working. But we are taking a look at that.
Yeah, and I agree. I think the only thing that we all agree on is that we need more generation. I don't think anyone's arguing that. I think everyone supports the idea of bringing more generation on, be it solar or dispatchable generation. I think to Representative McAndrew, I think having a meaningful usage of energy at the facility makes a big difference, right? Where you're just producing generation just to be sold back onto the market for price and compensation without having any intent to use it at the location is the problem.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you so much. And Chairman, if you could get us those numbers, we'll make sure Chairman Kozler's office has it. Thank you so much. We will now go to Representative Giroux.
Thank you, Chair Fiedler. I'd first like to thank the panel for their testimony. My question is for Mr. Lawrence. You mentioned avoided cost compensation as an option. How can we design an avoided cost framework that still encourages mid-scale solar projects on sites such as commercial rooftops and brownfields, which often provide real grid value?
I'd certainly hearken back to what Chair Causer asked a moment ago about what other states are doing. The first thing I would do is I would look at California. Because California is right now operating in an avoided cost model that I'm not sure how long it's been in place, but understanding how prevalent, how much solar there is in California, I think that they've been dealing with this issue for quite a long time. And as some of my other panelists here have said, Pennsylvania, we're currently a bit of a unicorn. And certainly even considering, let's say, California's environmental policies, they're still on an avoided cost model. So I would start by looking at them. I think one of the other things that's come up consistently throughout the testimony and the questioning is the fact that, and I agree, that the APS Act was intended to allow residential customers or small commercial customers to put up some rooftop solar, try to ameliorate their own electric bills. It was not a business opportunity. This was not a business venture that we were going to completely eliminate all of our usage and then make money by selling this back to the utility at what is currently a high price. So I think that's where we started out, but that's not where we are now, as Chairman and others have eloquently stated about the state of APS and net metering today. I think there is a classification here, let's say. You could think about sort of tier 1 and tier 2 customers, if you would. Those customers, residential or small commercial, who've invested in solar to the extent that they're displacing, let's say, up to 1% of their overall usage. And maybe that's 100%, maybe that's 90%. And then the next tier, you have the pure commercial generation that's been talked about. I think those two camps could be treated differently, and we could think about that as one possible path going forward.
Thank you. Would anybody else on the panel would like to comment on that?
I think Darrell handled it well. I couldn't agree more that there is opportunity here, and there's a value to distributed generation. We can't lose sight of that. And as conversations I've had with the chair, that there's certainly a value here, the speed of getting interconnected, and we're working on that. We got to do a little better job at the commission and getting interconnections done a little quicker. But it's just it's the benefit's too lucrative that we have to rethink of what we're doing for this sector here. I'm not even saying change how we treat households. I'm saying it's the merchant generator issue we got to get our arms around.
I'll just add real quickly. I agree with both the consumer advocate and the chairman. I think the rate classification and having the commission have the clear authority to create that rate classification makes imminent sense. And you're looking at each customer then based upon their impact on the system, both how much they use, but also how much they generate and put back onto the system. So if you have that rate classification and have the commission with clear authority to do so, would be a benefit.
Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Stambaugh.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As I was reading this voluminous testimony over the weekend from everybody, there was one thread that kept coming up, especially a lot of this is maybe segue into panel 2, but I wanted to ask Chairman DeFrank about it. There's a claim that there's a shell game being played right now in this space, that utilities, with the PUC's blessing, are changing the ways they assign customers to procurement classes, which of course determines default service compensation. And that then allows the PUC, under your rate-making authority, to approve changes to the price to compare with the express intent of reducing compensation for customer generators. I just wanted to get your thoughts on that.
So I think what you're referring to, and Andy talked about the UGI case, because they were the first rate case to do this. And what it did was it looked at net metering holistically, what the load is and what the offset is, basically the offset of it. So if you had no offset, it treated you like a merchant generator then and paid you the LMP. Is that the way of addressing this? No. The way of addressing this is through the legislature here. We've been sending over letters for about 2 years now. We have to do something. This is not sustainable. This isn't sustainable. I mean, people are going to be getting $10,000 electric bills. I mean, this is not sustainable. We have to change this. And so we have a pending rate case, so I can't talk a lot about it because it is in a PPL rate case as well. But I believe UGI did it in their electric division in their rate case, and then a few others had followed suit since then, but UGI was the first one to do that.
I would just say, Representative Stambaugh, it goes to the way that those customers impact the system. So you're looking at the supply impact on the system, both by how much generation they produce. It has an impact on how the companies procure their default service. So they literally assign them to existing rate structures within UGI. It's currently pending before the Commonwealth Court. So the Energy Association, along with the commission, which was unanimous, which I think is worth mentioning, is important, and we think it's a solid decision by the commission. We hope that it's upheld in the Commonwealth Court.
Thank you. Last question for this panel comes from Representative Armanini.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you all for your very informative comments and so forth. I guess I'm going to do a little street talking here, okay? From what I'm hearing is basically through the federal government throwing out all these insanely incentives to favor the solar market, to void fossil fuels. It was very advantageous for savvy business people to take advantage of, we're almost going to get our solar at a very reduced cost, put up these fields, start generating energy, and we get to sell it back to the energy companies at a higher price that is not the same as the competitiveness throughout the industry. Is that safe to say?
Somewhat. So this goes well beyond. If you're referring to IIJA and some of the recent federal legislation, this goes long before that. I first dealt with this back in 2011 when I was staff in the Senate. So this goes long before that. And one businessman, and I'm not going to say the man's name for fear of litigation. He's very litigious. But, you know, he had a business model. And so he was going around to farmers, and they started where we were putting up a street light, and that was the account. That was the draw, was the street light, and putting 3 megawatts of panels around it. They had since turned away from the street light. The actual draws, the actual panel, there is no load at all. And it's a business model. It's a very lucrative business model. So I think, so what had happened, a quick history of it. So I was staff director in the Senate at the time. The issue came up. So we were pressing the PUC to do regs. And, you know, what the law says was you can net meter a portion of your load up to 3 megawatts. So our position was, okay, you can net meter 99.99999%. If I ask you for a portion of pie, you don't give me 4 pies, you give me anything less than a whole. That's what I would say a portion is. So we pressed the PUC. The PUC eventually did regs. And so that's what the court decision in 21 was, or 20 was Commonwealth decision, 21 Supreme Court was overturning those regs. The court said the PUC didn't have the authority to do it because we weren't the agency administering the act. It was the Department of Environmental Protection. So then once those rules were struck out, then it was the Wild West. And then that's, right. You can see the number. I mean, here's the court case right here, and you can see the drastic increase. From 21 to 22, we went from just under 8,000 interconnections up to 14,000 in 1 year. A 70% increase in 1 year.
So with that, of course, that is a definite reason why ratepayers are paying a higher electric bill today?
That's part of it. I think there's a lot of reasons in
Right.
that, and you know, I think we'll be having those discussions in the coming months. But there's a lot of reasons. This is part of it.
For the panel, do you believe if we would have just let the solar industry develop as its own industry on its own feet, that you would be in this situation?
Well, I think that there's various aspects of the solar industry. From, if we're talking about utility scale, we're talking about rooftop solar. I think there's a lot of different variations of the solar industry, and quite honestly, personally, I think they're all of value in different facets of an affordable, reliable grid. I think rooftop solar certainly plays a role in that. I believe, you know, utility scale solar certainly plays a role in that. If anything is, this wholesale market should teach us one thing, is diversity in fuel mix is actually important. It's something that Chairman Struzzi has talked about for probably 10 years, about we're putting all of our eggs into one basket. We generate over 50% of electricity with natural gas now. So as natural gas spikes, it ripples over into the electric sector. Electric prices then spike. It ripples over into water sector. Water uses a lot of electricity to send water out through its systems. As we're putting all of our eggs into one basket, we're actually putting ourselves more at risk. So I would argue diversity in fuel source is actually the way to go, not sort of going all in.
Diversity on a fair playing level, though, correct?
Sure.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you so much to our Panel 1 members. We appreciate you, and you'll probably be hearing from us as we move forward. Thank you. Good, me too. Thank you all for being here. We're going to move on to our second panel for today. We have Todd Stewart, partner at HMS Legal, Elowen Corby from Vote Solar, and Katie Reaver from IGS Energy. Yet again, please know the members have your testimony in their packets. Feel free not to read directly from there. Feel free to summarize, and I know folks do have questions, so I want to make sure we get to those as well. Mr. Stewart, you may begin.
I think it's relatively self-explanatory. Sorry, I thought the button was on. There's two basic groups of customer generators. There's small customer generators who are residential, I should say, customer generators who are up to 50 kW, and then there's large customer generators. If we can go to the next slide. This is the list of all the technologies. I think we need to be aware of this as we have this discussion. It's not just solar. There's a lot of technologies that are involved in net metering. A couple of them I'm going to talk about in just a second, but there's a lot of different technologies that are available that are net metering in different ways. If we go to the next slide. Okay, the first is distributed generation. We talk about this, but this is the Act allows for distributed generation. So this is people using locally produced natural gas to generate electricity on a distributed basis, and up to 3 megawatts. There's a lot of expense involved in doing this. So it's not like just put up some solar panels and walk away. It's a lot of money, and so this shows the investment that one particular distributed generator, Credible Minerals, like $4 million to start doing this. So when we think about changing the law, there are expectations of the current law that people have made some serious investments in that would be lost if the law were changed, because under the current system they are able to be profitable, but under some avoided cost wholesale price they wouldn't. This would all go away. Next slide, please. You talked about visiting a farm in Juniata and Huntington. This is Rhineford Farms in Mifflintown. I think this is probably where you went. Mr. Rhineford is a client of mine, and they're doing an amazing job of not just using animal waste from the farm, but also using food waste from local businesses that have excess food. They're turning that into natural gas. They're then turning that into electricity. Without the price to compare that they get compensated for, these businesses would not be able to operate, and so they're not economic. And that's just the facts. I mean, so they get paid the price to compare. They don't get paid for distribution. They don't get paid for any of the other things. They just get the price to compare. So next, and then we've got a bunch of different uses for solar. We've got schools. This is Allegheny Community College. The next slide is Municipal Authority of Westmoreland County, and then the next slide is warehouse solar, which is popping up all over the place in the Commonwealth. So there's a lot of diversity in the supply. But why is this important? So the problem is that as we've heard from other people, that they perceive the problem is that when the Supreme Court overturned some of the Commission's regulations back in 2022, it did change the landscape for what customer generators do. There's no doubt about that. But the law is what the law is, and it incentivizes a lot of generation. And so we have a lot, and more is coming on at a time when we need it. I don't think there's anybody here says we shouldn't have the generation. The question is, what do they get paid? And right now, they get paid under the Commission's regulations. They get paid the full retail value as it offsets their generation up to they get to 100%. Once they have now offset all of their usage, they get paid the price to compare, which is the avoided energy cost. So they don't get, comparisons of that, the price to compare to the wholesale rate are a pure wholesale rate are a little bit deceiving, because the utilities don't buy most of their energy at wholesale. They buy full requirements fixed price contracts, which are essentially almost a pass-through retail price. So it's not that they're buying at some ridiculously low price and then reselling it. So we have to be careful of the terminology we use when we talk about what they're avoiding, because when a developer who's getting paid the price to compare is not getting that much more than what the utility pays for the energy that they actually deliver to customers. Let me put it that way. So I understand that the utilities want to be paid less, and I get that, and we have affordability problems, and I'm not disputing that. But I think the other side of this is, and we go to there we go, is that if we don't do something, if we don't do this carefully, there are literally billions of dollars of potential investment that will be lost. There are tens of millions of dollars of actual investment that have been put in the ground right now or being put in the ground right now that would be lost if you do something dramatic. I will be the first to admit that that net metering over in the next, whatever you want to do, 5, 10 years, will reach a point where we will have saturated the distribution system where there will be limited economic opportunity to add more. When we get to that tipping point, I don't know. We're not there yet, but I think we're clearly on the way with the generation that's in the queue. So you have to recognize that people are making that investment. You don't want to just cut them off and say no. So I'm proposing is that we have a known off ramp, that we talk about when we get to that limit. We talk about what we do after we get to that limit, and with a rational discussion with actual data. And I think if we do that in a thoughtful way, we can address all the concerns that everybody has rather than just saying we want to stop net metering tomorrow. Because there's a lot of other nuance in this that isn't being addressed by the previous panel. You have my testimony, so I'll stop there.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Stewart. I appreciate it. I'm sure we all have questions for you as well. Ms. Corby, go ahead.
Thank you so much, Chair Fiedler, Chair Causer, members of the committee. Thank you for having me. My name is Elowen Corby. Can you hear me?
Just make sure the green light is on, and you could always move the mic a little closer. Fantastic.
Right.
Thank you.
Great. I'm the Mid-Atlantic Regional Director for Vote Solar Action Fund. We are a nonprofit that works to advance a clean energy transition centered on affordability, reliability, and putting communities first. We really appreciate the committee's focus on rising energy costs. Too many families are being forced to choose between paying their utility bills and buying groceries or paying for medicine. At the same time, our grid is increasingly unreliable. Our region is projected to face an energy shortfall as early as the summer of 2027. And according to the PUC, 2024, which was the most recent data, was the worst year for power outages in over 30 years. So, compounding problems, interrelated. During World War I and II, governments encouraged communities to plant victory gardens to address food shortages and ease strain on the broader system. By 1944, a full 40% of the U.S. produce came from them. Local solar is ready to play that same role for our energy system as one of the fastest, most cost-effective tools available to bring new supply online, where it's needed most, easing pressure on an overstretched grid. Getting solar policy right is one of the most important steps that this committee can take to deliver real relief for ratepayers. My goals today are to make the case for local solar and the benefits it delivers to all Pennsylvanians, not just the people who go solar themselves, and to lay out recommendations for how we handle compensation for large-scale projects as the market matures. I'll start by spending some time on why local solar does matter for everyone. It's understood that families who install solar reduce their own energy costs, but solar's most important impacts extend to everyone else too. PJM's interconnection queue, which I know this committee has talked about a lot, blocks much needed large energy projects from coming online quickly. It's a major driver of rising prices. Distributed solar is small enough to bypass that queue entirely, often coming online in months rather than years. Local solar also helps at PJM by impacting the energy markets, which work like an auction where the last most costly unit sets the price for everything. Because solar has no fuel cost, it pushes down prices for everyone. A 2019 Synapse study found that small-scale solar in New England generated over $1 billion in wholesale energy savings for all customers over 5 years. Local solar also relieves pressure on the grid. Expanding our transmission and distribution system is expensive, and all ratepayers foot the bill. When local solar is factored into planning, it can avoid the need for costly new infrastructure. A recent analysis found that deploying community solar and storage could save California nearly $1 billion in transmission costs alone. And since about 5% of energy is lost just moving through power lines, generating energy close to where it's used means that we simply waste less. Finally, there's a resilience aspect. We've seen storms and equipment failures knock out transmission lines or large generators. An energy system that draws on many local sources is inherently more resilient than one that depends on a few distant plants. I'll also say equity and health are an important piece of this. Peaker plants, which are the dirtiest power plants, they're called on during peak demand, are disproportionately located in low-income communities and communities of color. They are exposing residents to health-harming pollution, and according to a recent Brattle study, virtual power plants, which I know this committee is also working on, which coordinate distributed resources like solar and storage in order to serve the grid, can deliver the same reliability benefits as peaker plants at a 60% lower cost. And I think folks know this, but local solar creates jobs, right? Clean energy employment grew at more than 3 times the rate of the rest of the economy in 2024, and these are jobs in our communities. So I'll talk a little bit about why net metering, and I'll kind of skip over explaining what it is, because you've all heard. Net metering has given Pennsylvanians the certainty that they need to go solar over the years. It has made solar accessible for over 80,000 Pennsylvania households. However, a growing number of merchant generator solar projects with no meaningful on-site load do qualify for net metering, receiving retail rate credit for energy that they export. And since most of their energy is excess at year's end, they bear little resemblance to the customers that net metering was designed to serve. I'll be clear, the energy from these projects has real benefits, especially as demand grows, but fitting them into the net metering framework isn't a long-term solution. It affects other customers in the same rate class and beyond and muddies the water for net metering overall. Utilities are already starting to address this through rate cases, as has been discussed. And if the legislature wants to shape how this issue is resolved, rather than letting it be decided piecemeal, the time is now. For larger systems, we advise a more sophisticated compensation model for excess generation, specifically a value of solar framework, implemented by the PUC with safeguards set by the legislature. This approach models the full benefits that solar provides, not just energy, but capacity value, avoided transmission and distribution costs, environmental health benefits, and more. The National Energy Screening Project has laid out clear guidelines for doing it well, and we recommend that the PUC engage expert consultants in the process. But Pennsylvania would not have to pioneer this. It's been done elsewhere many times. I should be upfront about concerns I've heard with this approach. First, some value of solar studies in other states have omitted major benefit categories or failed to compensate projects for benefits after the study concludes. It's critical that any legislation initiating this study be explicit about the full range of benefits to be studied and compensated. Second, these proceedings do realistically take time, so we need to ensure that the process moves with urgency, with public engagement, and with transitional incentives for developers to keep building in the meantime. This should apply to large generators, not to local communities. The benefits of simplicity and predictability for homeowners and small businesses outweigh any gains from added granularity at that scale. Introducing a complex compensation structure on the local level risks making it harder, especially for working families, to participate in the clean energy economy. Low-income households in Pennsylvania spend a larger share of their income on energy than any other group and have the most at stake in an affordable clean energy transition, from bill impacts to health benefits to good jobs. As you consider legislation, we urge the committee to keep communities in focus, preserving net metering for residential and small commercial customers, supporting programs that allow renters and low-income communities to participate in solar savings, and ensuring they aren't unfairly burdened or locked out of the clean energy transition. I'll also note that Pennsylvania has yet to authorize community solar, shared solar projects that allow those who can't host panels to access solar's benefits. We encourage the committee to advance community solar legislation and to consider how existing merchant generators might be encouraged to transition into community solar facilities over time. So in conclusion, solar is really good for Pennsylvania. It saves money for all ratepayers, it makes our grid more resilient and more efficient, and it creates jobs. Our policies should reflect that by preserving what works for smaller customers, modernizing what makes sense for larger systems, and keeping a focus on community impacts. So we look forward to supporting the committee's work toward a clean, affordable, and equitable energy future for all Pennsylvanians. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And our final testifier for today, you may go ahead, Ms. Reaver. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Chair Fiedler, Chair Causer, members of the committees. Thank you for the opportunity to be here today. My name is Katie Reaver. I'm the Director of Legislative and Regulatory Affairs with IGS Energy. IGS Energy, we are an Ohio-based energy company. We were founded when Ohio deregulated natural gas. And we serve residential and commercial customers with natural gas and electricity in 20 different states. As a company, we also do distributed generation, so we work with Pennsylvania-based installers to install rooftop solar on our behalf. As a company, we are committed to carbon neutrality. We're also a gas company. The energy industry is vast, complex. We can't get to carbon neutrality overnight. We know that for the foreseeable future, both traditional and green energy need to work together to meet the needs of the Commonwealth. So with that kind of background of who IGS is, I'm going to, you guys have heard these terms already, but I'm just going to say, behind the meter, I'm going to talk about that. I'm going to talk about that behind the meter, rooftop solar, customer sited solar. Those are all kind of the same. You've got front of the meter or merchant generators, which are also connected to the utilities distribution system, and who are sized, intended primarily to export the electricity to the distribution grid. And then you have utility scale, which is also front of the meter. However, they interconnect to the PJM transmission system and sell their electricity to wholesale markets. So those are the three sort of distinctions of solar that I'll be talking about today. Oh, thank you. Sorry, I'm not speaking into the mic. I apologize. Okay, so this slide here shows a number of pictures taken here in Pennsylvania from Pennsylvania companies of what rooftop solar is. It is very decentralized, relatively small in scale. A home might be 8 kilowatts. A small business might be 100 kilowatts, 150 kilowatts. You could get up some larger warehouses with a lot of load could take up to the 3 megawatt limits. Also, schools can aggregate, take that amount as well. They are a demand-side resource that is very akin, when consumed on site, to energy efficiency. They do not put pressure on greenfields and farmland because they're in the built environment. And these are projects where homeowners and businesses invest their own capital in these systems. Next slide, please. Just to put this up here, when we talk about the portfolio of energy in Pennsylvania, the very small sliver in yellow is solar, and then you see the call out, and The darker yellow is homeowners, the smaller yellow is the commercial, and then the gray is utility scale. So it just gives you a sense of the small penetration of solar and the small penetration of net metering in the Commonwealth. So all net metering systems, and this is, I think this data does not really take into account the merchant generator question and particularly the influx of merchant generators coming online, but kind of traditional net metering systems are less than 1% of retail sales, and rooftop systems, residential rooftop systems, are about 0.5% of retail sales. Next slide, please. This chart here shows the growth of solar in the Commonwealth from 2016, and the dark blue is the residential, and the light blue is commercial, and then the yellow is utility scale. So you can really see here the backbone of the Pennsylvania solar industry are these customer-sited systems that are that are using net metering. And the rooftop solar, I think, is really important, because of the decentralized nature of customer-sited solar, it impacts the type of industry that grows up to support it. It's much more akin to a home improvement HVAC industry, where the business cadence is kind of very smooth and always on, if that makes sense. Like an HVAC company is always looking to do more HVAC installations and therefore providing those stable and local jobs. There have been a number of stories where a small construction company here in Pennsylvania has expanded their business to include selling and installing rooftop solar. And these are the companies that are really being supported by the traditional concept of net metering. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is an image of when you have electricity on a roof, on a residential rooftop. This is really showing more residential. There have been a lot of questions about cost shift, and you're using the grid, but you're not paying for it. What is happening with the electron flow is you're consuming behind the meter first, and then particularly in these low penetration scenarios like we have in Pennsylvania, the electrons are flowing through the distribution grid a couple of 100 feet to your neighbor where the next source of load is. So it does not go back to the transmission system. It does not go long ways. So when you're thinking about what's the right value for those electrons, you need to take that into consideration as well. Okay, next slide, please. This is, sorry, this is a bit of an eye chart. This is just showing how net metering works. You've got behind the meter, so solar generates electricity. So the sun goes on the panels, it generates electricity. The house consumes the electricity, and then whatever it doesn't consume on site, it goes back to the meter and flows into the distribution grid. And it's really that point, the second half of the image, that describes the relationship between the utility and the customer generator. At its core, net metering is really a foundational policy that allows a customer to exercise their right to self-consume and or to self-generate and self-consume electricity, and then as well as being compensated for the electrons that flow back into the meter, flow back into the grid. Next slide, please. All right, so we've talked about how net metering is the underpinning of Pennsylvania's customer-sited solar industry, and there are examples, and we've also been talking a lot today about net metering reform. How does it need to change? And I would just give as examples from other states that can provide a warning where if we're not very careful about net metering reform, when we're looking at merchant generator, you're opening up the same exact law as with on-site solar. If you're not very careful, you could crater the industry. So this is in Nevada granted a number of years ago, but in 2015, the commission made a decision to vastly reduce the export rate. The industry cratered, right? There's job loss, lots of public outcry, and then the graph shows an increase in installations that happened after the legislature and the commission reversed course. Similarly, in Indiana, back in 2022, when the penetration was less than 0.5%, similar to here, the legislature and commission removed net metering. Solar installations dropped by 67%. And then in the next year, the local utility sought an increase of 23% to their electricity rates. Okay, next slide, please. This is what distinguishing between merchant generators and customer-sited solar. I think whenever you think about this, we really need to think about that distinction, as I think everybody testifying here today has talked about. The bottom line: don't let net metering reform hurt the mom and pop businesses that it's really that have grown up around it. I'd say that one thing that I would point to, and LON mentioned this in her testimony, is that several other states have developed differentiated compensation structures for front of the meter and behind the meter distributed generation. New York has a value of distributed resources, or VDER tariff, that compensates. This is a separate tariff. It compensates front of the meter distributed resources. They still interconnect to the distribution system and feed it into the grid. In Massachusetts, front of the meter systems are compensated with something called an alternative on-bill crediting mechanism. In both of these states, the traditional customer generator is still compensated through traditional net metering. And then I would also say in Maryland, right now, policymakers are grappling with how to untangle and differentiate between front of the meter and behind the meter systems. Last slide, please. All right, so this shows a report from the Edison Electric Institute, EEI. They are a Washington-based trade association lobbying on behalf of utilities. And over a decade ago, in 2013, I believe, they published this paper called Disruptive Challenges, where they identified a vicious cycle of coming from distributed forces that customer-sided, namely customer-sided distributed energy resources. Solar, rooftop solar, is the tip of the spear with these customer-sided energy resources. They really identified this conflict between distributed solar and the Wall Street investors that are supporting the IOUs. Since this time, utilities have led a steady and constant attack on net metering, including messaging here in Pennsylvania. Just reminding folks that, as of 2025, residential penetration in the Commonwealth was 0.5%. Since about half of this is consumed on site, what we're really talking about is what's the right compensation for that 0.25% of electrons that get sent back to the distribution grid. And just one more thing, because I know I'm going long. In case you hear that we need to act now in order to avoid being California, California is at 9%. There was a comment about we need to look to California for what they did. Okay, net metering, they followed net metering 1.0 until they got to a certain percentage. Then they transitioned to net metering 2.0 till they got to a certain percentage. Now they're at net metering 3.0. So I would just urge that sort of longer term view. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much to all of our panelists for sticking with us here. We will now go to questions. Do any of our members have questions for the panelists? Representative Armanini, you may go ahead.
Thank you again, Chair Fiedler, and thank you all for your presentation and comments. It looks like in Pennsylvania we have an energy issue, and we have solar, which we know is very important, and I agree we need to keep solar in the mix. But what are we going to do, with everything moving on to make sure that it is on the same playing field? You mentioned Ms. River from Ohio, what you're doing in Ohio. It is true. What Ohio has about 12 new natural gas facilities being built or coming online to be used to generate energy.
Subject to check. I'm not 100% sure.
Okay. Well, they do have quite a few on. And, so my concern is in Pennsylvania, we're going to get caught in this solar discussion. And, I can see, you're saying it's environmental friendly. Yes, it is. Right now, it's not helping reduce the cost of energy. It's increasing the cost of energy. So we can't have that. In the previous commission, that was stated due to that. Let's just look at this broadly. China is putting in 2 new coal power plants per week. And I'm just bringing that up to is that, what are we doing to Pennsylvania to put all these mandates, and we are just going so strictly with helping these new generations of solar and so forth, to whereas it's just putting us behind more on the grid. How are we going to do this? PUC said we're going to go dark by 2032. Yes, we need to focus on solar, but do you truly believe that they need this extra hand in helping them achieve this? Maybe my question's not coming over clear. I guess what I'm just saying is I believe in solar, but solar needs to stand on its own 2 feet. What do you think that's going to do? Is it going to continue to grow?
Thank you, Representative. Ms. Reaver or Ms. Corby, would you like to respond? Or both of you certainly are welcome to.
Thank you so much, Representative Armanini, for this question. I'm glad to hear that you see value in solar as part of our energy mix. Many of us have devoted our careers to this because we feel the same. You made a point that I do want to dig in on a bit. You said that right now solar is increasing the cost of energy. I don't believe that to be true. In my testimony, I laid out a number of data points that show solar helping to control the cost of wholesale energy, control the cost of expanding our grid. I'm with Vote Solar Action Fund. If we truly believed that assessing the value of solar would mean that the result showed solar is hurting people's pocketbooks, we probably wouldn't be recommending a value of solar study. I do believe that solar is good for everyone, not just for environmental reasons, but because it supports our energy system, it supports affordability, it supports resilience. So I think that is just a kind of level-setting point that I want to make sure comes across clearly. We believe solar has enormous benefits. We acknowledge solar has costs, but a study that is framed out carefully and conducted according to best practices can evaluate both of those. And I think, I certainly hope, but I also believe that it will show solar's benefits across many different lines of comparison.
Okay, I can see your views. One question for you then. Do you support new generation of natural gas energy facilities in Pennsylvania?
So part of Pennsylvania's energy issue, and this has been referred to by previous testifiers, is that we are very invested. We are dependent on natural gas to an extent that is leading to some pretty significant downsides. About 60% of our energy comes from natural gas, and we are a net energy exporter. When you put all your eggs in one basket, there are negative repercussions of that. When you also look at the projected costs of natural gas going forward, it's only getting more expensive. So my assessment from the data that I am familiar with is that natural gas and increasing deployment of natural gas is not a solution to our affordability issues. I'll also mention that it takes a lot longer to come online. So we need energy fast. Natural gas is not a solution in that avenue either.
Well, we can have natural gas in 3 to 5 years if legislation can push it through. So I'm sorry, I disagree with you on that. We cannot rely on solar as the main energy source in Pennsylvania. We all know when we had this very cold spell here past the winter, these past few weeks, it was not solar that kept the lights and the heat on in Pennsylvania. It was natural gas and coal. You will never do that with solar in our climate.
I will note that there is, and I hate to keep coming back to data again and again, but I will note that there is data that shows that solar has been more reliable in winter conditions.
Oh, I just wanted to say, you had said that solar is raising costs, and my understanding from the previous panel, the focus was the concentration on one small business class. That's my understanding of the concern from the first panel, and it's the fact that those costs are fully borne by one small rate class, and then also that the compensation level was not something that was studied and set per what Ms. Corby was saying. So I can leave it there.
Thank you. Representative McAndrew.
Good afternoon now. We made it to the afternoon. Specifically, I want to ask, what's the difference, basically, cents per kilowatt between price comparison and wholesale rates? Like, what is that really differential in cost, and what impact would it truly have? Now, I have solar panels on my roof, so I'm very curious about this.
Yeah.
Like, how much money would I lose?
So for somebody with solar on your roof, it's a very small percent that would be very small. Your size to load, presumably your size to meet your annual load, roughly. I have solar on my roof. I'm at like 70% of my annual load. But so the amount of electrons that you would be compensated at a different rate is a very small proportion of what because it's your annual excess generation. For the merchant generators, it's like 99.9% of it that when people talk about moving from the PTC to wholesale market to wholesale rates, it's like 99.9% of the electrons that they generate would compensated at, let's say the PTC is 12 cents and wholesale is 4.
So if we'd switch them over, they would be getting 4 cents per kilowatt versus 12 cents per kilowatt.
Rough in that order of magnitude.
Okay, and are we aware of, like, last year how much they were paid per kilowatt on across the industry?
Todd, do you know that for merchant generators?
The LMP right now is in the averages around 4.2 cents, something like that.
And that's wholesale. So in New York, their VETR tariff is based on, it's a value stack. They have the LMP, and then they've studied what the distribution value is, what the transmission value is, and they have different zones where the distribution value is different based on what utility zone you're in. And that's the value, that's the study that they did, the value stack that they did to come up with what's the right compensation for the front of the meter distributed tied systems, which is a very separate policy from the system on your roof.
Yeah, I completely understand. I was trying to equate both of them, but I do appreciate the insight. Thank you.
Thank you. We have 2 more questions. We're going to go online. Representative Williams, I know you've worked on this issue for a long time. We will go to you, and then I will have the final question. Go ahead, please.
Madam Chair, and I think I'll be brief. Mr. Stewart, I'd like to come over to you. As you heard me say to the chairman of the PUC, I greatly value intellectual honesty, and I feel like you said the quiet part out loud, and I just want to follow up on it, which is that the economics of solar, be it rooftop or even at scale, they're just not feasible if we don't pay the retail rate. And then I'm assuming, and I don't want to assume, that's going to be my question. I'm assuming that includes offsetting all of the requirement of a solar generator, either at residential scale or at larger scale, to offset all of their distribution costs. That's part of the economics for building solar. So let me ask that as a question, sir. If we require solar generators to pay their fair share of the distribution system, in other words, pay their distribution bill, would it remain uneconomic such that it wouldn't be built? Because I got to tell you, I'm focused like a laser beam on electricity costs for my constituents and ratepayers. And for them to be bearing the cost of the capacity market that's out of control, and now bearing the distribution cost of their solar neighbor who's using that distribution system to have their electrons go a few hundred feet, I don't think that's fair. And I'm trying to find every bit of savings I can. If we require solar generators to pay their distribution cost, does it remain uneconomic?
No. The question, if I'm understanding the question, the way it works right now, the customer generator is only compensated for distribution up to the point where it's a break even, which for a large customer generator is going to be pretty quickly, within the first month of the year, they're going to break even. And so after that, they're only getting compensated at an energy cost. And so they do pay the distribution. If you're asking if they should pay distribution on the energy that they inject into the system, and would it work? I think the economics would work.
Thank you, Ms.
So
Reaver.
That's
I think if one other panelist would like to respond, go ahead.
good.
Thank you, Mr. Williams, and I definitely agree with the concept of intellectual honesty and looking at these questions on a very broad scale or from all different perspectives. So thank you for your question. I would say that with regards to solar customers or other customers paying for solar's fair share of the distribution grid, it really comes down to, so there's this question of, is there a cost shift? And do the utilities, utilities, when they go in for a rate case, they are, granted they're granted the right to have a reasonable return on investment. There's a band of ROE that's a reasonable return on investment. These things I know you know from all of your time with the utilities. The revenue loss that is associated with customer-sited solar is so small that it could never impact them meeting within that band of their return on equity. And without that, you're not actually shifting costs onto your neighbors. Now, in the next rate case, if they come and they show that net metering has caused this, then I suppose that could happen. But with the current distribution, the current levels of distribution or of penetration, you'd also have to look at the cost to serve these customers. That's a factual question that has not been looked at. Do rooftop solar customers cost less to serve? And then, in this world of increasing demand, when you put distributed solar on the grid, you are putting downward pressure on transmission and distribution, and lowering those long-term distribution costs.
Thank you. The final question today, I'll offer to you, Ms. Corby, if I could. You talked about the fact that distributed solar reduces or avoids transmission and distribution costs. I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about that. In your testimony, you say, when energy is generated locally, it doesn't need to travel long distances, which means less energy is lost to inefficiencies like line losses. This is something the committee plans to tackle in the future, but I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that and its value in avoiding those costs.
Absolutely. Thank you for the question. So Katie actually in her slides had a great image here that shows that when energy is generated at, say, a home, if there's extra, it goes to the homes next to it. Think of it a little bit like a water droplet. That electron is not going to end up, on the other end of the state. which means that it just doesn't need to travel as far. When we don't need to send electrons or draw electrons from far away, that means that the infrastructure between distant places that could carry that electron if needed doesn't need to be upgraded as quickly. So that is kind of the logic behind avoiding these transmission and distribution upgrades. There are also benefits that local solar can have for the distribution grid that we haven't talked about here, like voltage control. I thought that was maybe a little bit too, I think it's in the written testimony, but it was a little too techy for here. But the reality is our energy system, our grid is the most, it's the largest machine in human history, and it is built for a time that we no longer live in. The energy system of the future is more distributed, it is more flexible. It's also, hopefully, stronger and cheaper if we don't need to send energy far away.
Those transmission upgrades, how expensive are they? How much would that sort of thing cost? Ballpark.
Ooh, I'm not a transmission
Anyone can take
expert.
a stab at it. I'll be your Mr. Stewart, if you.
I don't have a number, but they're expensive.
Yeah.
I don't know. We'd have to talk to somebody at the commission to find out, but it's a lot of money.
Go ahead. I'll also note just really quickly on transmission upgrades. You can do them in the kind of traditional expensive way, which is adding more poles and wires. There's also increasingly really effective technology that is able to serve a lot of those same purposes at a much lower cost. So I believe there's interest in this committee in looking at things like non-wires alternatives and grid-enhancing technologies. We absolutely support that as a way of saving money for ratepayers and improving our grid.
Great, thank you. Did you have anything you wanted to
I was going to add a tangential thought, if that's okay. Mr. Williams had mentioned that the capacity markets are kind of going crazy, which we all know about. I'd say one of the things that Ohio has done that potentially Pennsylvania could look to is they have recently required data centers to increase their collateral into the queue, and that's caused a clearing of about 80% of the interconnection applications for large data centers, and therefore they've been able to send that data, that lower demand projection, to PJM, and therefore lower their costs. And so that's something that Pennsylvania could look to, is saying, how do we really get a handle on how much AI is actually going to come in?
Great. Thank you so much. And I think that's a great note to end this hearing on, and something the committee will be handling in the future. Thank you again to all of our testifiers. Mr. Chair, do you have any closing comments? All right. Thank you to everyone. This has given us a lot of food for thought. I look forward to tackling this issue with the committee members. And now at 12:17, this meeting is adjourned. Have a great day.